Right. We're looking at a plan here that is going to have a double-sided piece, meaning that there's joints on both sides. So this is the front of the cabinet. Drawer down here, there's going to be some doors and then some open spots. And right here is the back view. And we can zoom in a little bit on the back view and see that we are planning to have these dadoed in on both sides. And we're not going very deep because if we were to go half the thickness like normal from one direction, and half the thickness from the other, we would be all the way through that. So we're only going to come in about 1/8 of an inch in depth on both from both sides. So this middle divider is an example of where we would see a piece that is double-sided where we might have to cut this on the CNC router. So let's take a look at how we would set this up. All right, we're going to show you how to make a piece so you can cut both sides of it. So for example, this piece right up here, this outside edged piece needs to be cut on both sides. And we need to have these dados on both sides. So what I'm going to first do is draw a new box around here. And what this needs to do is be a little bit bigger than my existing box. And so this is going to be the first cut, and it's going to cut out the outside shape. And then what we're going to do is flip it over, and it's going to be attached in here. We're going to put some holes in here so we can index it when we turn it over. So what I'm going to first do is just get this box roughed in. It doesn't have to be anything perfect here, right, to go with. And I'm going to just try to make it fit because we do want to fit on this sheet of plywood. I'm going to bring it in to the edge here and then maybe move it over. It's just giving us something to hold on to right now. But I do want it a little bit longer, especially since we have that room right here. So now that this can fit on here, I'm going to position it so it's on the white space so that we're not hanging off. And I'm going to make it fit as best I can. So I don't want these to overlap. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. Oops. I don't want everything highlighted when I do it. I just want this outside box. And so I'm going to move this box up a little bit. And we need to move the whole thing down. So I'm going to highlight that and move that down to fit on there. And we might have to bring this just down just a little bit more to fit on there. So maybe something like that. So we've got this extra border around there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find, I want this centered in there, really I do. So I'm going to click on this piece. And I'm going to find where the center is. So I'm going to use move selected objects. I got the center clicked. And in the X position, I am 12.35. I'm going to copy that number, okay? 3596. Copy that. And then I'm going to hit close. I don't need to move it. But I want to move this one now. And I'm going to do the same thing, hit move. And what we're looking for is these two numbers to match. I'm going to go Control V to paste that in there and apply. And now they should be at the same distance centered wise. You could do that up and down as well. We could take this piece and click the move button and find what the center is up and down and copy that and do the same thing here. Highlight that box and move that. And I'm going to paste that number into there so that it's centered in that orientation. So now we're going to need to draw a circle. I'm going to use this circle tool right here and draw a circle. I'm going to click that and come out here. Now it's telling me that if I'm doing the diameter or radius, and I want the diameter picked, and I'm going to pick 3/8. We're going to use a 3/8 dowel for this. So I'm going to put 0.375, enter. It's pretty small, and that's fine. What I'm going to do is take the center of this piece, and that was 12.3. I'm going to copy that number again, and I'm going to now take it to this circle, and I can either open up the move or the circle tool. It doesn't matter. I got the centered picked, and I'm going to go the X, and I'm going to put that in the center of that piece. So that's going to be there, and we're going to do the same thing down here again. So I'm going to click the circle tool over here in the toolbar, and I'm going to pick and draw a 3/8 diameter, 0.375, enter. And I'm going to put that in the X position at that coordinates and create. Now it's a little high for us. So if I just select that, I can use my arrow tools to push it down. I don't want to move it from right or left. I just want to move it down. So I want to keep it centered on there. That one looks pretty good. So now when we're going to go set up our toolpaths, we're going to click on this switch to the toolpath command here. And when I select this, I'm going to actually pick these two circles, and I'm going to hold shift and select both of them. And you can see they are pink. And I'm going to do a pocket because I want to carve out the middle of that, and I want to go all the way through. So I'm going to go 0.75. And we're going to use the 1/4 inch end mill. That's fine. And I'm going to put on here 3/8 or just holes. And I'm using a 0.25 bit. And I am going to calculate that. Now, when you see these red lines, that's just the movement the tool is going to do to cut those holes. So the machine's going to start down here in the home position. It's going to come down here, drill this hole, and then come down here and drill this hole. So those red lines, you don't need to be too worried about those. Those are just the movement of the machines. So I'm going to go back to my 2D view up here in the left-hand corner and click on that. And now when we cut the outside lines, so I'm not going to pick this one, but I'm going to pick this one in here instead. And this is where I'm going to set my tool path. And I'm going to come in here. I'm going to set it to go 0.7 inches deep or 0.68, somewhere in there, to cut most of the way through. And I'm going to go outside. I want to be cutting outside the vectors. And this is a bigger piece, so I probably don't need a tab on this. That's okay. And I'm going to put on here outside of double-sided piece, 0.25. So I know what the cut is, and calculate. So that's the outside edge. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to set this outside piece to cut all the way through this time. So 0.75. And again, this allows me, the machine, to put all the pressure on there that it needs to go around and cut. And then on the very last pass, it's only taken off about 0.5 of an inch. And so when I come here, it thinks it's going to cut all the way through. So I'm going to edit my passes and change this to be 1. That way I don't need the tabs, and it gives me a nice clean cut when I'm done. And I want to be outside again. That looks good. And I'm going to go outside, double side, second pass, 0.25. And calculate. We need to set up the dado cuts right here. And I'm going to hold shift and select this one, and right here. I'm going to come up here to my pocket toolpath, and I'm going to make sure that we're setting the right depth. So I had this set for cutting holes last. We were going all the way through. So I want to make sure I change this. We only want to be going, since they're going to be dados on both sides of this, we don't want to cut all the way through or halfway through. If we go halfway on this side and then flip the board over and do halfway again, that would be all the way through. So I'm only going to go about 1/8 of an inch deep. That's enough to give my wood a little lip to sit on. So that should be good. We're going to go 0.125 inches deep. And I'm going to come back here and change this. This is going to be dado double side, just so I can keep my things oriented together. And so that's only going about 1/8 of an inch deep for those cuts. Right now, I've got all my tool paths for this double-sided piece set up, and you could set up the rest of the stuff to cut out in the one sheet, but this is particularly talking about the double-sided piece. So I want to see what that's going to look like on my piece. I'm going to hit this preview tool paths, and if I click reset just to clear everything off and then preview tool paths, it's going to show me all my cuts. And if I circle around and look, you can see I've got my dados in there. My dados aren't very deep. They should only be 1/8 of an inch deep. And we are cutting all the way through on the holes and the groove. That's what we want to do. Okay. So what this is going to allow us to do, our 2D view, it's going to allow us to cut out this piece so we can move it around. And it's going to have holes so that we can line this up. So, all right, this is the piece that we have that we want to cut on both sides. So we've cut our first side out. We've left it big with this border all the way around. We have some holes in here, 3/8 holes for our index pins. So I'm going to move this off the table for now. We don't need this one quite yet. And what I have now is a sacrificial piece of wood. Today it's a piece of particle board, and that's on top of our typical spoil board for our machine. This particle board piece is where I'm going to drill those index pins into, so that when I align that piece over and flip it over, it will be lined up in the right place. So I'm going to put the pins up,
and I'm going to get this in place, and then we'll take a look at the computer.
All right, so we've now run our first piece, and we're done with this other stuff. For the moment, I'm going to delete all this extra pieces. I don't want to delete any of my parts that I want to do the double side on, but I'm just deleting these other parts for now. And I can recalculate the toolpath so that way it only shows me the stuff that I want here. Now, I don't want to cut this way at the far end of the machine. I want to be working down here, as this corner is where the XY is homed. So I'm going to move this down a little bit. And it doesn't have to be right on the edge. It could be over one direction or the other a little bit, however you want to place that on there. And then again, I'm going to hit toolpaths, recalculate, since I moved it. Tells me there's an error because it's trying to recalculate stuff that's not there anymore. All right, so I'm over here at my toolpaths. If I double click on the holes, because that's what I want to cut first, I want to make sure we're going 3/4 of an inch deep. And that's about all I need to check on here. And then what we're going to do is actually save this toolpath. So right here, I'm going to save the toolpath and save it. I'm going to save over my 0.25 because that's what I need, and hit yes. So once I've saved that, then I'm going to come out here to the machine, and I'm going to put the pins up so I can align my board, and I'm going to turn the vacuum on. And while this is running, I'm going to have it pre-drill those holes for me so that I can align my piece. And if I go File, Open, when I first open from desktop 0.25, I should see that I'm going to get just 2 holes drilled in there for now. That's what we want to see. So I'm going to get my board lined up, and then we're going to come back and hit Enter on the machine to get it running.
So now that we've got our board lined up to these index pins, we're nice and tight against all of those pins, we're going to turn the vacuum on to hold this in place. So I took the compressed air and blew out our hole, and now I'm going to take one of our little dowel pins here and push it down in there, and that's what we're going to use to index our piece so that it's in the correct spot as we flip it over. I'm going to come down here and do the same thing and put that pin in that hole. And now I'm going to get my board that we originally cut. I've got the board over here we originally did, and that pin that we put in the table is now going to go in this hole. You may want to make sure that this is orientated the same way. So when I was on the computer, I just shifted it down. So I'm going to want to make sure that the good side, or the top side, is still on the top and the bottom side is still on the bottom. Even though I did my efforts to make sure it was centered, I still want to orientate this the way it was originally on the machine. So I'm going to flip this over and very carefully guide this pin onto that hole. And I'm going to do the same down here. I'm going to guide the pin that's under there onto that hole. And once they start to line up, then I'm going to push this down nice and tight on there. Now, because we have this extra layer of sacrificial piece, what's going to happen is the vacuum is not going to be able to suck this piece down. So in this instance, we're going to need to make sure we're using tabs to keep this in place as it's cutting so it doesn't move, because the vacuum is not going to have enough suction to hold this down through that second piece.
So we're done with the holes. We're not going to be working with them anymore. But what I'm going to check on is the outside double side here. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to show me it's cutting the outside. Well, I need to change that now. Now I want to cut this piece out right here. I want to do the outside edge of this inner piece, and I want to be outside. That's checked. We're going 0.68 deep and 1/4 inch end mill. All that looks good. We're going to add tabs, and we're going to edit the tabs. And I'm going to come in here, and I want to put a tab around this piece, but I'm going to avoid where the joints are. So I'm going to come around. If there was a rabbet on the end, I would want to avoid this end. it becomes difficult to clean up these tabs on the end if there was a rabbet here, because the rabbet, as we're cleaning it up, the flush trim router bit would want to follow along that rabbet rather than the edge of the board. So that's why we're choosing to do tabs on the ends, because there's no rabbets. We'll be okay with that. So I just went around and put a few different tabs on here to hold this in place. Because remember, the vacuum's not going to do a very good job at sucking this down. So it's really these two pins that are holding this in place as we cut. So we want to make sure there's nice tabs around here, and we could take the flush trim router when we're done and clean these up. So I've got that done, and I'm going to hit calculate. Now I have this other one that doesn't have tabs, and I'm going to delete that right now, this double pass. I'm going to delete this. And what I want to do is I want to take this one and I want to copy or duplicate this. This is going to allow me to, as I click on this, cut around the outside, and it's going to keep those tabs in the exact same location. That way I don't accidentally put a tab here and then maybe offset it, so there's not any strength with that tab. So that's why I want to keep those tabs, or I wanted to duplicate that so those tabs are in the same location as I do that. And this time, again, we're going to go 0.75. We're going all the way through, but we've already cut most of the way through. So we're going to change this to 1. We want to do it in 1 pass because it's already cut to 0.68 depth. And we're going to scroll down. We want to make sure we're on the outside still. That looks good. Outside vectors. And we're going to calculate. So now if I preview this, preview all toolpaths, it should show you that we're cutting all the way through, and it's leaving some tabs. So that all looks good. I'm going to save everything except for the 1/4 inch holes. We already did those. And I'm going to close this view, and I'm going to go save. And I'm going to save this as 0.25 again, and just save over that old file. And now when we come in, we have to adjust a few things in this interface here. I'm going to have to change the home setting. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to come up to settings, and I'm going to go to the home position. And in the home position, I'm going to pick the pins plus spoil board plus 3/4 scrap. That's the one I want right there. And I'm going to click go to, and the machine is going to move to that location. So I'm going to go to there. So that means my home position is set. I'm going to turn the pins on and make sure this is lined up, and then vacuum it down. And now I'm going to load the job I want to do. File open, 0.25, open. And you can see it's going to cut out the outside. And I'm going to hit enter.
All right, so we're gonna get our piece unloaded here. It's just held on with these dowels, so we're gonna just gently lift up. I wanna try not to break the little tabs too much because I wanna cut them. If possible, I wanna cut them with this little saw so that we don't tear up the piece of plywood. So I'm gonna pull up this side. Well, and the tabs all broke. That's fine, they did their job. But what we don't want is this to happen on the other piece and then have a chip out of your plywood. So this looks like it will do. We've got our joints cut on both sides. That looks good. One of them does look a little bit deeper, but this would be the most accurate way that I think you would cut those on both sides. You could skip this part and just line it up to the corner, but this only works if it's a big piece, because small pieces would not be held in place very well with the vacuum held down. So this vacuum is holding our scrap piece down, which then we pin this to our other piece, and that's where we're getting the stability. If this was a small piece and it wasn't over one of those vacuum holes, then that's where we would have a problem.
Back at the machine here, the last thing I'm going to do is reset this home position to my normal thickness or the pins 0 here. That way, when someone else comes to use this, it's set up for what they need. So just click on it and I put go to, and it's going to come out here and rehome itself. Again, if you have any questions with how to do this double-sided cutting, please talk to your instructor.